5 years after my ex-husband abandoned our dying son to run away with his mistress, he called and demanded to see the boy. There was only one problem. Jacob had been dead for 5 years, and Marcelo still did not know what his final betrayal had cost him. I was at the grocery store, stocking up on holiday supplies, when my phone suddenly pinged with a friend request. The profile picture was a scenic shot I'd casually snapped years ago, and I knew right away who it was. But we hadn't spoken in 5 years. Total radio silence. I had no idea why Marcelo Golden was popping up now. So, I typed into the verification field, "What's going on?" His reply flashed up almost instantly. "I'm back. Can we meet? I have something important to tell you in person." Something important. As I stared at those words, I found the situation both absurd and amusing. What could be so important between us after all this time? I pushed the thought aside, pulled out my phone to scan the payment code for the cashier. And once the transaction was complete, my first action was to block his contact permanently. While I was waiting at a red light, my phone buzzed with a call from my best friend, Olive Sanson. She started cautiously. "I heard he's back in town." Cut her off flatly. "That has nothing to do with me." She let out a deep sigh, her tone laced with clear frustration. "You know how small this world can be. People run into each other all the time. You're likely to cross paths eventually. And when that happens, not a chance, cut in again. He's out of my life for good." I ended the call, but shortly after, my phone notified me of a message from our college class president, Adele Kenny. She inquired whether I planned to attend this year's reunion, and included a thoughtful note: "If you decide to skip it, I'm totally on board. Everyone gets your situation." Then she threw in some heartfelt words of comfort. As I gazed at the lengthy text on my screen, I found it strangely entertaining. I had already moved past the ordeal, yet those around me seemed unable to let it go. Perhaps the intensity of the drama from back then had left such a lasting impression on them. In truth, I had released all of it. These days, I even needed to concentrate to recall what Marcelo Golden even looked like once. He had been the center of my world, my deepest love, and someone closer to me than family. We were childhood sweethearts who had shared every stage of life the same: elementary school, middle school, high school, and college, followed by studying abroad together. My phone alarm went off, pulling me from my reverie. Right now, I had more important things to do. I parked at the base of a mountain and grabbed the bags I prepared, heading up to the chapel. A young attendant spotted me and approached with a warm smile. "Miss Lopez, you're here again." I handed him some of the holiday items, and as he accepted them, curiosity lit up his eyes. "You visited at this precise time every year for the past 5 years without fail. May I ask why?" I offered a smile, but provided no answer. Proceeding directly to the rear courtyard where a perpetually locked meditation room stood, I unlocked the door to reveal a sparse interior featuring only a table that held a solitary memorial plaque. I began unpacking the bags, arranging the contents on the table one by one while murmuring to myself. "The clerk at the toy store mentioned these are the most popular toys this year. I'm not sure if Ultraman is trending where you are, but I picked up several varieties just in case. And this blind box. They say it has a chance of containing a rare collectible. You'd love that." After placing the toys, I set out an assortment of snacks. "You probably don't need to worry about brushing your teeth over there. Feel free to indulge in chocolate right before bed without fearing cavities." I chuckled at the thought, but soon tears began to stream down my face. With great care, I wiped the plaque that bore the name of my son, Jacob Golden. Below it was my name, but the father's name was left blank. Every year, I carried the newest toys up 8,000 stone steps and placed them before Jacob's memorial plaque. By the time I walked back down, I could usually breathe again. That day, an unknown number called before I reached my car. As I approached my car, however, my phone rang once more. It was an unfamiliar number, but the voice coming through was unmistakable. "Even if you refuse to see me, you must at least allow me to see my son." I ended the call right away and blocked that number, too. For a full 5 years, my life had been entirely free of Marcelo, and I was thriving in that absence. I drove back to the office, and as soon as I stepped in, My assistant wore a troubled expression. That partner we've been negotiating with for months just pulled out. I looked up, asking what was their reason. Our product quality and pricing are both competitive. She appeared equally baffled. I pressed for details. They implied that we might have offended the owner of the Golden Group. Even after all these years, Marcelo's methods of pressuring others remained unchanged. With a furrowed brow, she continued, but our businesses don't even compete directly. Why would he target us? I set down my pen and said calmly, because he is my ex-husband. Marcelo had rebuilt the Golden Empire with me beside him, then pushed me out. For Chloe, the assistant he claimed was harmless, I had ignored the rumors until I found them naked in our bed on our son's first birthday. After that, he moved her into our home and warned that if I embarrassed him, he would bankrupt my family. However, just as I prepared to initiate the divorce proceedings, Jacob was diagnosed with acute leukemia. The doctors explained that a bone marrow transplant offered the best chance for recovery. I underwent testing immediately, but I was not a match. In my despair, Marcelo's test results came back positive, transforming him into my final lifeline for saving our son. For Jacob's sake, I postponed the divorce. Marcelo donated bone marrow twice, and both procedures succeeded, gradually stabilizing Jacob's condition. But then Chloe announced her pregnancy. She consulted a supposed mystic who proclaimed that her child was a lucky star for the Golden family, destined to bring unending prosperity. The entire household treated the unborn baby like a precious gem. Chloe complained that her current room had poor orientation and coveted our master bedroom. Marcelo permitted her to evict me to a storage room, that Jacob's well-lit room would be ideal for her child's nursery, as the staff discarded his beloved toys and books into the trash. And I could no longer contain myself. I rushed forward to intervene. You cannot touch my son's belongings. But the bodyguards Marcelo had hired specifically to protect Chloe obeyed her commands and restrained me on the floor. She reclined on the sofa, her lips curled in a provocative smirk. Want me to spare his room? Sure. Make my shoes clean and I'll call them off. You're delusional. I glared at her. You wretched woman. You'll get what you deserve. No sooner had the words left my mouth than my hair was seized, followed by a sharp slap across my face that left my cheeks swollen and burning. Marcelo loomed over me, his gaze devoid of warmth. Have you lost your mind? Chloe is carrying the future of our family. How dare you curse at her like that? Even a minor scrape on my skin would have caused him to stress. Yet now he was striking me for another woman. From that day onward, life for Jacob and me became increasingly unbearable. Under Chloe's influence, the housekeeper served us spoiled meals. Our cramped storage room was dim and chilly, lacking heat during the winter months. One midnight, Jacob woke me up crying, "Mom, I'm hungry." I attempted to sneak to the kitchen for food, but Chloe discovered me and shrieked accusations of theft. With temperatures plummeting to 10 degrees below zero, Marcelo confined me to the outdoor garden for the entire night. I shivered until my lips turned purple, repeatedly reminding myself to endure just a little longer. Once Jacob recovered, everything would improve. The doctors assured me that a third bone marrow transplant would restore his health completely. Clinging to that hope, I tolerated every indignity and torment. Yet I never anticipated Marcelo's ultimate betrayal. The day before the scheduled surgery, I noticed the household staff packing luggage, which triggered a wave of unease. And he responded as nonchalantly as if discussing the weather. Chloe prefers to give birth in a low-key way, and the company requires expansion overseas anyway, so we're relocating tomorrow. My blood ran cold. What about Jacob's surgery? He shrugged dismissively. I've secured a new donor for him. The procedure will proceed as planned. Don't worry. Once I sort things out abroad, I'll be back. I immediately called Jacob's attending doctor to confirm, only to learn the surgery was cancelled with no new donor in sight. In a frenzy, I demanded answers from Marcelo. Why did you cancel it? Are you trying to kill him? He snapped back, impatient. Stop being unreasonable. You're simply fabricating issues to prevent our departure. To ensure no delays in his plans, He ordered us locked in the wine cellar. That cellar was the last place Jacob ever called for his father. Marcelo chose an overseas flight with Chloe over the transplant only he could provide. 5 years later, he still believed our son had simply disappeared with me. My phone rang, interrupting the painful recollection. Assuming it was my daughter calling for a bedtime story, I answered promptly. Instead, Marcelo's furious roar echoed through the line. They claim Jacob is gone. For the first time in 5 years, I did not hang up. I held the phone to my ear and waited for Marcelo to ask the question he should have asked before he boarded that plane. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Marcelo said, much more quietly, "They told me Jacob is dead." I leaned against my kitchen counter. Yes. His breathing changed. When? 5 years ago. No. The word came out so quickly that I almost laughed. No, that's impossible. I spoke to his doctor before I left. You told me the transplant was being arranged. You didn't speak to his doctor. I did. You spoke to me. His voice went silent. I continued, and you believed me because believing me was convenient. You wanted to leave with Chloe. You wanted your new child. You didn't want a sick little boy delaying your perfect new life. Where is he?
Dead.
Stop saying that.
Why?
Is the word unpleasant? Marcelo's breathing became ragged. Where is my son? I closed my eyes. For 5 years, I'd imagined this conversation. Sometimes I'd imagine screaming. Sometimes I'd imagine telling him every horrible detail. Instead, my voice was strangely calm. He died 3 days after you left. There was a long pause. Then came a broken whisper. 3 days? Yes. Why didn't you call me? I laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. Call you where? Your private number was disconnected. Your secretary told me you were unavailable. Your overseas office refused to transfer me. I emailed you 6 times. I never received those. I know. What do you mean? Chloe deleted them. Silence. Then Marcelo said she wouldn't. She did. She was pregnant. And Jacob was dying. His voice cracked. I would have come back.
No.
I would have. You wouldn't have. How can you say that? Because you had one chance. I stared at the memorial photograph sitting beside my kitchen window. You had his hospital room number. You had his doctor's number. You had my number. You had enough money to charter a private jet and reach us before he died. My fingers tightened around the phone. You had everything. I swallowed. You simply chose not to use any of it. Marcelo began breathing heavily. What happened to him? I didn't answer. Please. That word almost made me smile. Marcelo Golden had never said please to me. Not when he ordered me out of our bedroom. Not when he threatened my family. Not when he left Jacob locked in that cellar. Now he was begging. So I gave him the truth. The cellar lost power that night. His breathing stopped. The temperature dropped. Jacob was already weak from chemotherapy. He kept asking when you were coming back. I looked down at my hands. He said you promised you'd bring him a dinosaur toy from overseas. Marcelo made a strangled sound. I told him you were busy. I paused. By morning, he couldn't stand. Stop. I carried him upstairs. Stop. I called the emergency services. Please stop. They took him to the hospital. My voice finally trembled. He died holding my hand. Marcelo sobbed. Actually sobbed. I had never heard that man cry. Not when our marriage ended. Not when our company nearly collapsed. Not when his mother died. But now? Now that he knew Jacob was dead? He couldn't breathe. Did he ask for me? I stared at the memorial photograph. Yes. Marcelo broke. I heard something crash on his end. What did he say? He asked me why his father didn't love him anymore. A sound escaped him that didn't even resemble a human voice. I let the silence sit between us. Then I added, those were his last words about you. Marcelo whispered, I didn't know. I know. I swear I didn't know. I know. I would have come. You already chose. He began crying harder. Please tell me where he is.
No.
I need to see him. You're 5 years too late. I need his grave. He doesn't have one. That stopped him. What? Jacob was cremated. Where are his ashes? I smiled faintly. Somewhere you'll never find them. Why? Because I promised my son something. What? That the man who abandoned him would never get to pretend he was his grieving father. Marcelo went completely silent. Then he whispered, "You're cruel." I laughed. Cruel? I looked toward the mountains. I spent 5 years learning how to live without my son. My voice hardened. You've had 5 years to live without knowing he was dead. I hung up. For the first time in 5 years, my hands were shaking. Then someone knocked on my front door. 3 slow knocks. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked toward the entrance and checked the security camera. My heart stopped. Marcelo was standing outside, and beside him was Chloe. She was crying, but she wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at the house, at the exact place where Jacob had once lived. Then Chloe lifted her head and smiled. I opened the door. "What are you doing here?" Chloe wiped her tears. "I came to apologize." I almost laughed. Then she whispered something that made every trace of amusement disappear. "I know what really happened to Jacob." I stared at her. She stepped closer. "And I know you weren't the one who locked him in that cellar." Behind her, Marcelo turned pale. I slowly opened the door wider. "Come inside." Chloe smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that, because 5 years ago I had lost my son. But apparently, Jacob had left behind one final secret, and Chloe had just walked into my house carrying it." Chloe stepped inside. Marcelo followed, looking like a man who had aged 20 years in an hour. I shut the door. "Talk." Chloe glanced at Marcelo. Then she smiled. "The night you were locked in the cellar, I was the one who ordered it." Marcelo stared at her. "What?" She shrugged. "I told the guards to lock the door. I told them nobody was allowed to open it until we were on the plane." Marcelo's face drained of color. "You told me Jacob's surgery was canceled because the doctor couldn't guarantee success." I lied. His eyes widened. "You said there was another donor." "There wasn't." "You knew." "I knew everything." I watched Marcelo crumble in real time. Chloe continued, almost casually, "Your son wasn't supposed to die that night. I only wanted to delay the surgery until after we left. I thought you'd arrange another donor once we settled overseas." "You thought?" Marcelo's voice cracked. "You thought?" He lunged toward her. I stepped between them. "Don't." Marcelo stared at me. "You trusted her?" "No," I said. "You trusted what she told you, because you wanted to believe it." Chloe suddenly laughed. "You're both acting like I'm the villain." I turned toward her. "You locked a dying child in a freezing cellar. And you let him die." That sentence hit differently. I slapped her. Marcelo grabbed my wrist. "Enough." I yanked free. "Don't touch me." For once, he obeyed. Chloe wiped the blood from her lip and smiled. "You want to know the funniest part?" She pulled out her phone. I recorded everything. She played a video. 5 years earlier. The cellar door. Jacob's weak voice. "Mom, when is Dad coming?" My knees nearly gave out. Then his tiny voice again. "Dad said he'd come back." The recording ended. Marcelo collapsed onto the floor. "No." I looked at Chloe. "Why keep that?" "Insurance." I smiled. "Thank you." She frowned. "For what?" "For bringing me the evidence." I pulled out my own phone. "I've been recording this conversation since you entered." Chloe's smile disappeared. I continued. "And the police are already on their way."
Marcelo looked at me.
"You called them? 5 years ago. I was too busy trying to save my son." I looked directly at Chloe. "This time, I'm prepared." Sirens sounded outside. Chloe's face went white. Marcelo stared at her in disbelief. "You killed my son." Chloe screamed. "You abandoned him." "I trusted you. And I trusted you to get rid of her." They both stopped. I smiled. "Keep arguing. The police can hear everything." Minutes later, Chloe was arrested. Marcelo wasn't.
Yet.
As the officers took her away, She twisted around and screamed at him. "You're just as guilty." Marcelo stood motionless. Then he turned to me. "Can I see Jacob's memorial?" I shook my head.
No.
"Please. You already missed his childhood." His eyes filled with tears. "You can't keep him from me forever." "I can." I walked back inside. "Because he isn't yours anymore." The next morning, every major news outlet carried the same headline. Golden Group heir accused of abandoning terminally ill son as mistress faces homicide charges. By noon, Marcelo's empire began collapsing. Investors fled. Partners withdrew. The board demanded his resignation. And then came the final blow. I released the recording. The public heard Jacob asking for his father. They heard Chloe ordering the cellar locked. They heard Marcelo admitting he trusted her. The man who once owned half the city suddenly couldn't walk outside without cameras following him. 3 months later, Chloe was sentenced. Marcelo lost everything. His company, his fortune, his reputation, his new family. But I didn't feel victorious. I simply climbed those 8,000 steps again. I placed a new toy beside Jacob's memorial. Then I whispered, "Dad finally knows." I smiled through my tears. "And you don't have to wait for him anymore." I turned around and walked back down the mountain. This time, I didn't look back. A year later, Marcelo had lost everything. Chloe was serving her sentence. The Golden Group had been dismantled. And Marcelo had become a bitter, broken man obsessed with one thing, finding Jacob's ashes. He eventually discovered the mountain chapel. I found him there one winter evening, standing outside Jacob's locked memorial room. "You shouldn't be here."
He turned.
"I know where he is." I stared at him. "You don't." I found the records. His hands trembled. "Jacob was cremated here." I said nothing. Marcelo smiled through tears. "Please, just let me see him." "You had 5 years to see him." He reached for the door. I stopped him. Then something inside the old chapel groaned. A crack split across the ceiling. The caretaker shouted from the hallway, "Everyone out." I stepped backward. Marcelo didn't. He had spotted something on the memorial table through the doorway. Jacob's little toy dinosaur. He pushed past me. "My son." The ceiling suddenly collapsed. I was thrown backward by the impact. Dust filled the corridor. When it cleared, Marcelo was gone. We found him beneath the fallen stonework. Still conscious.
Barely.
His fingers were curled around the tiny dinosaur.
He looked at me.
"Tell him." His voice faded. "Tell him Daddy came back." I stared at him. "You're too late." His eyes closed. The paramedics arrived minutes later, but there was nothing they could do. Marcelo Golden died holding the toy he had once promised to bring his son. I didn't cry. I simply took the dinosaur from his hand. Then I carried it into Jacob's memorial room. I placed it beside the plaque. "Your father finally brought you something." Outside, snow began falling over the mountain. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt like Jacob could finally rest.